The culprit is not only the Republican Party, but it's also the Supreme Court. The right-wing majority on the Supreme Court gave the Voting Rights Act the narrowest possible meaning in order to render it powerless against 21st century voter suppression. Congress deliberately wrote the Voting Rights Act broadly so as to protect against both obvious and insidious forms of voter disenfranchisement. The broad language of the Voting Rights Act prohibits not only the denial but also the abridgment of voting rights. It prohibits not only discriminatory intent but also racially disparate impact. It requires that all methods of voting be equally open to communities of color, and that communities of color have an equal opportunity to cast their ballots. And so anything that undermines equal openness and equal opportunity is a violation of the Voting Rights Act properly interpreted. I would submit to you that voter suppression in America has no greater ally than right-wing judicial activism. Instead of interpreting the Voting Rights Act as written, the right-wing majority on the Supreme Court has chosen to rewrite the statute out of existence. The enforcement mechanisms of the Voting Rights Act have been all but eviscerated. There was Section 5, which provided for preclearance, which enabled the executive branch to protect voting rights. And then there was Section 2, which provided for litigation, which enabled the courts to protect voting rights. Both of these enforcement mechanisms have been gutted at the hands of the Supreme Court. The former in Holder versus Shelby County, and the latter in DNC versus Brnovich. We know from history, Madam Speaker, that the most effective tool for preventing voter suppression is preclearance. According to Justice Kagan, from 1965 to 2006, the federal government harnessed the power of Section 5, the power of preclearance, to prevent 1,200 voting restrictions from taking effect. And so we should see the desecration of both Section 5 and Section 2 as a call to action, as a call for the United States Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would restore preclearance not only for select jurisdictions, but for every state and locality across the nation. Now, let it be known that the greatest obstacle on the path to 21st century voting rights enforcement is the filibuster. The filibuster perpetuates a status quo that disenfranchises communities of color. And so if you are a defender of the filibuster, then you should dispense with the pretense that you are a champion of voting rights. If you are a defender of the filibuster, you are not part of the solution, but you are part of the problem. Both the 2020 and the 2021 election cycles have been a powerful testament to the influence of the black vote. I proudly come from New York State, where we have seen a golden age of black political power. The Attorney General, the State Senate Majority Leader, the State Assembly Speaker, the Mayor are all black. And we know that, but for the black vote, President Biden never would have won the presidency. And the Democrats never would have won a majority in the Senate. And the attempts at voter suppression that we've seen threatens to reverse the racial progress that has been made. Increasingly, we're becoming a multiracial democracy. The Democratic Caucus, 70% of the Democratic Caucus consists of people of color, women, and members of the LGBTQ community. But you would never know that from the structure of the Senate. The structure of the Senate concentrates power in a small subset of states that are much whiter, much more rural, much more conservative than the rest of the country. Before the Democratic Party won the Senate in 2021, the Senate Republican majority represented 10 to 15 million fewer people than the Senate Democratic minority. And the problem is that the filibuster takes the undemocratic structure of the Senate to an even greater extreme. The notion that one senator who represents a state smaller than our congressional districts should have the power to overturn the will of the President and the Senate and the House is profoundly undemocratic. It makes an absurdity of the democratic process. You know, one particularly egregious example of the filibuster can be found in the area of gun safety. In a rational world, every gun would be registered and safely stored. Every gun owner would be licensed and trained. Every gun sale would be subject to a background check. But there's nothing rational about a political system that enables one senator from a state smaller than my congressional district to filibuster gun safety at the expense of 330 million Americans. Name any cause: LGBTQ equality, voting rights enforcement, immigration reform, democracy reform, criminal justice reform. All of these causes have died at the hands of the filibuster. And I would submit to you that we have a party in America that is intent on holding power at any cost and by any means necessary. Right? If the Republican Party cannot win democratically, then it will insist on winning undemocratically through voter suppression, gerrymandering, the structure of the Senate, the Electoral College, right-wing judicial activism on the Supreme Court. All of these are means of holding onto power by any means necessary. All of these are means of subverting democracy at any cost.